Cool. Well, we've got a decent amount of content to get through tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and get us started. So thank you so much for joining us. This is the Solar 101 for the Northern Arizona Solar Co-op. This is actually our fourth co-op that we've done in this region of the state. And so I'm really thankful that we were invited back by our partners to do this again. You all have some bragging rights. This has historically been our largest and most successful co-ops in the state. When I first started Sun, I always thought Phoenix would kind of be our biggest markets, but y'all in Flagstaff are very passionate about solar, and you have some amazing community partners at the City of Flagstaff, City of Sedona, as well as Coconino County that have really made this program hugely successful in the region. And so thank you so much for being here. Let's go ahead and get started. My name is Adrian Keller. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the Arizona Program Director for Solar United Neighbors, or SUN for short, as we often call it. As Arizona Program Director, I oversee all of our efforts throughout the state of Arizona, including deploying solar, mostly through our solar co-ops, in addition to some of the policy and advocacy work that we are engaged in as well, to make it easier for future Arizonans to install solar as well. Also joining me tonight is my colleague Trinity, who uses they, them pronouns. They will be monitoring the chat as we go throughout tonight. So I will take a pause in between each section in case we have any questions that we need to answer out loud. But please, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to enter those into the chat, and Trinity will be answering those as we go. Also, just wanted to note this webinar is being recorded. We will share a copy of the recording with everybody after this. It'll also be on YouTube in case there's anybody you want to share it with. And I mentioned this briefly at the top, but really it's worth saying again, thank you so much to City of Flagstaff, City of Sedona, and Coconino County for being our official partners for the Northern Arizona Solar Co-op. These organizations don't give us financial support. They're really here to help us organize the co-op, plan it so that it's successful for the local organizations that we're trying to help here. They help us sometimes with press, with getting the word out, with planning events, and are all around just incredible resources and amazing people that I've had the chance to work with at Flagstaff, Sedona, and the county. So if you're new here, Solar United Neighbors, or SUN, we are a 501c3 nonprofit, and we're a vendor-neutral organization. So we do not align ourselves with any one installer or company. We're also a nonpartisan organization. So while we do policy and we advocate for policies, we don't endorse particular candidates, and we're not aligned with any one political party. Our mission is to help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. And that work started all the way back in 2007 when SUN launched the very first solar co-op back in Washington, D.C. Walter, who is Anya's son, and his friend Diego were at school one day, and they saw the movie An Inconvenient Truth. If you're unfamiliar, it was a very famous movie at the time that really brought to light the challenges of global warming and climate change that we are facing now. Walter and Diego were really affected by this movie, and they went home and they said, "Hey, Mom, we got to do our part. Let's go solar to help the environment." Anya was into it. She was excited about the idea, but quickly found out that going solar wasn't such an easy process. There were tax credits and financing and power purchasing agreements and all these wonky terms and acronyms to work through. They were getting conflicting information from different installers in the area. And all around, they just felt like there wasn't a lot of easy to understand consumer facing information that helps people go solar. And so they said, hey, some of our neighbors, they're probably also interested in going solar. What if we brought some of them along with us and we kind of worked together on this project? So Walter and Diego, they literally went door to door in their neighborhood and enlisted the help of about 50 or so neighbors. And they all met together to sort of untangle this whole solar process together. And, they thought, hey, if all of us go solar, we may even be able to get a bulk discount from an installer. And that's exactly what happened. After that first ever co-op, Anya started getting calls from other communities in the area and then later other cities and states. And we've been doing this kind of work across the US ever since. Since 2007, we're closing in on 10,000 families now that we've helped go solar. I'm sure we'll have a big celebration when that happens. That's just over 78 megawatts, which is a ton amount of clean energy installed on the grid today. And we just surpassed over 1 million tons of CO2 that has been saved thanks to all of these solar installations across the US. And Arizona is one of our newer states at Sun. We've been working here just since 2019. In that time, we've helped more than 500 families install solar with us. I say families because they're mostly families, but we do also help some small businesses, nonprofits, and houses of worship. Just in Arizona, that's more than 4 megawatts of installed capacity. Cumulatively, our members have spent about $12 million on their solar systems. But what's really exciting for me is that they're going to save about $22 million over the lifespan of those systems. It's $22 million that would have been in the pocket of the utilities and is now these families to use with for whatever they'd like. All of this new sales, design, solar installation, permitting work, all of this has helped to contribute to about 90 solar jobs in the state. And wonderful thing about that is a lot of those jobs are very high paying and don't require a college degree. And then, of course, we've also helped to offset a significant amount of CO2 emissions just in the state of Arizona. And this is our 18th solar co-op now in Arizona. We've had a lot of success with this model of helping people go solar. Most of our co-ops when we first started were in Maricopa County, but we now operate in Tucson, up in northern Arizona, where you are all today. And we've also done one co-op in Yavapai County and one in Cochise County. As we expand and grow, I'm really excited about the opportunity to do more co-ops, especially in rural communities in the state. And I'm sure we'll be expanding this map in the years ahead. So I mentioned our kind of mission, our values. We want to help people go solar, join together, and fight for their energy rights. So what does that mean exactly? First, we help a lot of people go solar, both through our co-ops, like what's happening right now, but also individually. If anybody has questions or needs help going solar, we'll help them out one-on-one and provide the resources they need. We help homeowners mostly, but also small businesses, nonprofits, houses of worship, a list that is constantly growing as more and more people are interested in benefiting from solar. And then we bring people together. That includes this Solar 101 right now. We'll be doing an in-person version of this in Sedona and in Flagstaff later this month. We also host happy hours, lobbying days, tours. We provide a lot of resources to help solar enthusiasts effectively advocate for their rights. And when we talk about solar rights or energy rights, that covers policies like community solar to make sure that renters have the benefits of solar power, even if they can't install it on their own home. Making sure that solar owners are compensated fairly for the value of their solar, that there's not new flat fees or taxes imposed on solar owners. Another big one is making sure homeowners associations can't restrict people's ability to install solar. So we're working really hard at the local level, the state level, and the federal level to make sure that anybody who wants to has the ability to benefit from solar. So today's presentation, we've got 3 sections. First is the solar technology, kind of how does it work? How does it get attached to your roof? Then we'll go into solar economics. That covers, how to pay for solar. Also, we'll cover tax credits and incentives. And then the last pretty small section is just kind of detailing how our co-op model actually works and can help you go solar. Like I said, I'm going to take a quick pause in between each of these sections, but if you have any questions, please feel free to drop them in the chat and my colleague will be answering those as we go. So first is solar technology. If you're all new to this, you may be asking yourself, how do solar panels even work? So when we're talking about solar tonight, we're really specifically talking about solar photovoltaics or PV cells. And this is the technology that converts solar energy into electricity. Solar panels are made up of several semiconductor materials, mostly silicon. And when photons from sunlight hit that solar panel, it dislodges those electrons that are all nestled in there and generates a flow of electricity. You may have heard of solar thermal or solar hot water heating, and those technologies still exist today, but right now the vast majority of the market is made up of PV solar. That's what you see when you're driving around town and see people with solar on their roof. And so that's really what we'll be focusing on tonight as well as through the co-op. A solar panel is also known as a solar module, and each panel is made up of about 60 to 70 cells, individual solar cells, that are sort of sandwiched in between these 2 glass frames. And solar panels are decently large. Average is about 6 feet by 3.5 feet. So, you definitely need enough size on your roof to be able to handle multiple solar panels. But when you put all of those together in a row like this, we refer to that as a solar array. And then to talk briefly about how the system gets attached to your roof, what you as the consumer need to know is that there's generally a racking solution for just about every type of roof, unless you have, an antique home where your roof is in really bad shape. Pretty much all roof types now can handle solar, and the technology is constantly improving to be able to do it better and handle even more roofs. Pictured on your screen, this is kind of sort of that typical asphalt shingle roof, excuse me, that we see a lot of in throughout the US and in Arizona. With this type of roof, um, they are going to use a racking system where the rails here are going to be screwed onto the roof, and then the panels are kind of clipped on top of those beams. If you have a flat roof, though, solar certainly works well. Okay. Your installer may use a couple different methods here to make sure that the panels are angled at the most optimal position. They may use what's called a pitch pocket system, where they literally just pitch the panels upright onto a racking system so that they're angled the right way. For some roofs, though, your installer may use what's called a ballast system, essentially weighing those panels down so that they're secure. But certainly, if you have a flat roof, if you have a metal roof, there are solutions to install it as well. And I know in Coconino County and in parts of Yavapai County, certainly ground-mounted solar is something that's going to be more appealing to people. This works best if you can't or don't want to install solar on your rooftop, and particularly if you have a decent amount of flat usable land that you can use for a ground-mounted solar array like this. It's important to understand, though, that ground-mounted solar is almost always more expensive than rooftop solar. You've got to pay for the racking system that is hooking it into the ground. Depending on how far away from your home, you may have to pay for some additional trenching or wiring to connect it to your home's electricity box. And there can just be a variety of other flat fees associated with that. So if you're able to install solar on your roof, that's definitely going to be the best bang for your buck. But if you have a farm, you're in a rural area, or you just have lots of acres of land, particularly if you want a much larger solar array, ground-mounted solar is definitely something worth discovering and something that you can get through this co-op. And then you will need an inverter. Every solar installation comes with an inverter to take that direct current, DC energy, and invert it into alternating current, AC energy, so that your home and the appliances in your home can actually use that power. There are essentially two main types of inverters. So a string inverter strings everything together through one central box and is controlled through a central panel. These are most often used for very simple solar installations. Maybe if there's just one or two identical solar arrays, string inverter can work just fine. Microinverters, they're doing the exact same thing, but just on the individual panel level. So there'll be a tiny little inverter under each actual solar panel. And microinverters are often used for more complex installations. If you have solar panels kind of spread out all throughout your roof, maybe if you get shading on parts of your roof, the microinverters can kind of compensate for some of that. And overall, sometimes improve the overall efficiency of the system. If you're interested in going solar, you don't need to know now, I definitely want this type of inverter or I need this type of inverter. Your installer is going to have a preference based off of the type of installation, and they'll be able to walk you through all your different options when the time comes. And then to connect the solar to your home's electricity system, it's usually a pretty simple connection to your electrical box or electric service panel. Most homes don't need to upgrade their panel in order to handle solar, but some do, especially older homes are more often likely to need a service panel upgrade. When solar installers bid on our co-op, we always ask how much it will cost to replace a service panel before they bid. It's really, really helpful for consumers to have that information going into it, especially if you know you have an older home that may need an upgrade. You want to have a sense of how much that's going to cost you. I'd also like to note that thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, there are tax credits and rebates depending on your income that can help pay for upgrading your service panel if it's required for solar. Excuse me. And then just to clarify a little bit of the terminology we'll be using tonight, and I probably already have used, apologies. So a kilowatt or kW is a unit of power. So that's what we use to describe the size of a solar system in 1,000-watt increments. So 1,000 watts is 1 kilowatt. And so pictured here on your screen, we've got 6 solar panels. Each of them are 400 watts each. 6 times 12 is 4,800 watts. So we'd call this a 4.8 kilowatt solar array. And this is just sort of the typical sizing language and terminology that we use to describe how big a solar system is. Kilowatt hours, on the other hand, kWh, that is a unit of energy. So that's what you see on your utility bill. It's used to describe the amount of electricity that your system is producing. Also, the amount of electricity you will be purchasing from APS, since your solar system can't produce all of the energy you'll need. In Arizona, the average system size that we tend to see is somewhere around 8 kilowatts. But certainly every home is different. Every home is going to have different needs. Some people use a lot more electricity than others. And so that's kind of this typical size you see, 7 to 8 kilowatts, but certainly some will need more, some will need less solar. All right, fitting everything together here, you've got your solar array, your beautiful solar panels installed up on your roof. They are absorbing sunlight and generating a flow of electricity. That electricity is flowing through the solar inverter, which is inverting it from DC, direct current, to AC, alternating current. And then the electrical panel I sort of think of as the brains of the whole operation. So it's directing power where it's needed, when it's needed. And then solar owners will have what's called a bidirectional utility meter. This just means that the meter is able to read and measure how much electricity you consume from APS. But also, if you're producing extra solar that you're not using at home, the utility meter can also measure that as it's being fed out onto the grid and being used and consumed by your neighborhood. So net metering is something that I think a lot of people have probably heard of. You may have, especially if you're thinking about adding solar, and it's worth kind of explaining what exactly that means. So net metering historically has been one of the most, if not the most important policies that has really enabled solar power to kick off in the United States and made it economical and feasible for a lot of people. With net metering, with a system that has net metering, it's going to track the flow of electricity to and from you, the consumer. And whenever you're producing more electricity than you're using, that power gets fed back out onto the grid and you receive a credit. And so you're really only paying for the net electricity that you consume. Now, historically, this happened at a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you were paying 10 cents a kilowatt hour for electricity, you produced an extra kilowatt hour of solar, you would get credited at that same 10 cents. This worked really well. We felt like this adequately compensated solar owners for the value of their energy. Unfortunately, due to a lot of reasons that I won't go into today, this system of net metering is on its way out in Arizona. And very few utilities still have net metering. Today, especially for APS customers, we have what's called the resource comparison proxy instead. For short, we call it the export rate. So all this means is instead of getting a 1-to-1 rate of being paid back for any excess production, you're getting compensated at a flat rate per kilowatt hour. So for APS right now, it's somewhere around 6 to 7 cents a kilowatt hour. And unfortunately, the Arizona Corporation Commission has permitted the utilities to decrease that rate by about 10% each year. So next year, that'll drop down to somewhere around 5 to 6 cents. The good news, though, is if you decide to go solar this year, you're locked in at that current rate for the next 10 years. And that's really, really valuable because it allows you to adequately and effectively predict how much savings you're likely to experience with that solar system. So bottom line, if you get solar, you're producing more than you need. You're still getting compensated for that power, but unfortunately just at a less rate than you would have, 8, 9, 10 years ago. So this co-op is open to pretty much most people in Coconino County, as well as Sedona, which I know goes a little bit into Yavapai County. So pretty much everybody in this co-op will be an APS customer. If you're not, if you're up in Page or if you're in one of the tribal utilities, please let us know so we can prepare a chart for you that more accurately represents your situation. But for APS solar customers, you'll have about basically two rate plans to choose from. They're both time of use, and they both have the same hours, 4 to 7 p.m., when electricity costs more on peak. That's pretty similar to likely what you already have on your bill right now. And so you'll see on your bill a charge for on-peak energy charges, electricity you use between 4 and 7 p.m., off-peak energy charges, electricity you consume outside of those hours, and then skipping down that solar export rate credit, that 6.86 cents a kilowatt hour, that's what APS pays you back for any excess solar generation that you're producing but not using at home. And then APS, of course, has a variety of service fees flat that are unfortunately unavoidable. Um, so the main two differences between these two plans, the plan on the right has what's called a demand charge. And that is a single flat fee you pay every month based off of the highest single hour of usage during on-peak hours. So basically, APS is going to look at all of the hours you used electricity in a month between 4 and 7 p.m. And whatever hour you use the most, they'll charge you a flat fee for, which is about 20 bucks right now. Because of this, we found the majority of APS customers with solar tend to choose this simpler plan on the left without the demand charge. Even though the pricing of electricity is more expensive, as you can see, you'll have solar panels and hopefully you'll be self-consuming and producing most of the energy that you need and can avoid some of those costly on-peak energy charges. Whereas it can be really difficult for solar to offset or avoid that demand charge unless you are just extremely, extremely careful. You've got smart thermostats and you're really careful about not using a lot of electricity between 4 and 7 p.m. But we do find most people tend to choose the plan on the left. And if you have any questions about that or would like to run through that in any deeper, please let us know. We'd be happy to help. All right, so what makes a good site for solar? The orientation of your roof is going to be one of the most important factors here. So if you're able to install solar on the south side of your roof, that's always going to be your best bet. That's where your roof is absorbing the most amount of sunlight and where you'll be able to generate the most amount of electricity. Installing solar on the west side of your home can work really well as well, especially when we're thinking in the context of those peak pricing hours. So, right now APS charges more for electricity between 4 and 7 p.m. I realize we're getting into fall now and the sun is setting, but for most of the summer we just experienced, the sun is still out between 4 and 7 p.m. Your solar is producing a lot of power as the sun is setting, and that a west-facing installation can really help offset some of those higher peak costs. Solar on the east side of your roof works well as well. We just don't recommend putting solar on the north side of your home. And then shading is another important factor. You want to make sure there's not a really big tree or trees that are shading a significant portion of your roof. Also look out for if there's structures or nearby buildings that could cause some shading on your roof. That's a really important factor. Definitely some people do trim their trees when they install solar so that they're able to absorb a little bit more electricity. But if you've got a really big ancient tree that you're really attached to, that may not be an option for you and just something to think through before. And then, of course, you need enough unobstructed space on your roof to be able to install solar. Um, like I said, panels decently large, about 6 feet by 3.5 feet. And so you need a decent amount of space on your roof. But the panels don't all have to be, in conjunction with one another. They can split it up if you've got an AC or a swamp cooler or something on your roof. I wanted to note that when people sign up for our solar co-op, the very first thing we do right out of the gate is a free satellite roof review. So we have our solar experts check out your property via satellite, check on the orientation of your roof, the shading, as well as the spacing. And we'll let you know before you get any further down the process whether or not your roof is a good site for solar panels. One question we get asked a lot is what happens if you have solar and then the grid goes out, if there's a power outage? So if there's a power outage, there's a big storm or there's a downed line or something, if the power shuts down, your solar will shut off automatically. This is a safety mechanism built into the inverters of the system. And the reason is, let's say there's been, a thunderstorm, there's some electricity lines that have fallen down on the road. APS has crews out working to repair them. They don't want any spare electrons from your solar system flowing through those lines, which could, harm or injure those electric workers. So it's really a safety mechanism. If you have solar, your system is shut off as soon as there's a grid outage. But if you want to have power when the next time the grid goes out, you may want to consider battery storage. Battery storage is definitely something that a lot more people have been interested in recently, and more people in our co-ops are tending to choose batteries, which is especially nice as the prices have fallen a little bit. Some of the reasons for selecting a battery, if you experience frequent utility outages, that can be a really pain or even life-threatening. Having that sense of backup power for peace of mind is really helpful. Also, if you have critical loads that you need to power at home, my parents, for example, they have their own well, and so they require electricity to have water. If the grid goes down, they don't have water. And so having solar plus battery storage can help with things like that. Or if you have medical equipment or a fridge with, medicine in it that can't go bad, things like that can be really helpful for a battery. And of course, just general emergency, disaster preparedness, resiliency is really important. But I also wanted to note more and more people are adding batteries to their installation to help them save money. So this is Amy pictured on the screen. She went solar through one of our Phoenix co-ops a couple years ago, and she installed a battery. And her battery is programmed to turn on right at 4 p.m. and power her home until 7 p.m. and then it will shut off. The next morning, it's recharged by any excess solar that she's not using, and then she's got that battery in case she needs it. So this can really help her avoid some of those peak pricing hours between 4 and 7 p.m., while at the same time having that source of backup power for peace of mind if she needs it. If you want to dig in to the details of battery storage, we've got a great free guide on our website, solarunitedneighbors.org/storage. One other quick case example of where a battery might be valuable. So this is the Johnson family. They also installed a battery with their solar, and they lose power several times a year. And so they got a 13.5 kilowatt hour battery bank. That's a pretty typical size for most batteries. Side note, you can stack them, so you can have multiple batteries if you want. If the sun isn't shining, this family has about a day's worth of power without that, if the grid is out. So that battery will be able to power their refrigerator and microwave, some lights and outlets in their home, as well as a cable modem and a small window air conditioning unit. But that one battery is not going to have enough juice to power their electric stove, their dryer, or their electric hot water heater. Similarly, if you have a whole HVAC home system or a large air conditioning system or heating system, that likely won't be able to power it as well. And so important just to set some expectations if you are thinking about getting a battery of what they can and can't do. But if you have any questions about that, please let us know. All right, finishing out this section with some of our frequently asked questions. First is about warranties. So a typical solar installation is going to come with three different types of warranties. First is the power production warranty, and this is a warranty that comes from the manufacturer of the panels and the equipment. This is usually a 25-year warranty that guarantees the panels will still produce at a certain level as they did on year one. So for example, we may see a 90% 25-year power production warranty. All that means is that your solar panels are guaranteed to produce at least 90% of the power that they did on day one. And if they don't, the manufacturer is on the hook to replace those panels. Second warranty is a parts warranty. That'll cover the solar panels, the inverter, any other physical parts associated with that installation. These can definitely range depending on the installer and the manufacturer, but typically we see anywhere from 10 to 25 years for most parts warranties. So your inverter goes out, it broke within 5 years, that will be replaced for free if the system just malfunctioned. And then a labor warranty, that's the third one, that covers any roof penetrations or work done by the actual installation crew. So when they're, installing the system on your roof, they do have to make some penetrations usually. If they go too deep or there was a mistake, and then later you notice some rain pouring through your roof, and then the mistake was from the installation crew, they would be on the hook to make those repairs. And typically, we always like to see at least 10 years for a labor warranty, but we've seen them as high as 20 or 25 years. One other note on warranties, I wanted just to mention more and more people are interested in what's called third-party insurance or third-party coverage. And so you can add this on when you purchase your solar installation. So say you get solar, 8 years down the road, something breaks, but your installer's out of business, which unfortunately has happened. A third-party company, if you've purchased that coverage, will honor all of the same warranties as when you signed up. And that can be really valuable for peace of mind, especially since some of these warranties are for a really long time. Homeowners insurance, when you add solar to your home, it's always a good idea to call your insurance company and let them know. The vast majority of people don't see any sort of increase in costs or change in costs at all. This is because solar panels actually provide a level of protection against your roof from rain and hail and some other environmental factors. So most insurance companies actually consider panels an asset because they can, make the lifespan of your roof a little longer. If you do see an increase in your coverage, I would definitely call and ask why, and it may be time to start shopping around for a new provider. So with maintenance, one of the really cool things about solar is that it's very low maintenance. I wouldn't say it's no maintenance, but it is a low maintenance system. Normal precipitation, normal rainfall is going to help keep them clean from any dust. But if you do, get a really large dust storm, or for some reason there's a lot of dirt covering those panels, it's a good idea to call a cleaning company. There are solar panel cleaning companies, just to make sure that that dust or debris isn't going to impact how much power you produce. Every few years, it's a really good idea to have a visual inspection done by a professional company, just to come out and check that everything with your system is still working as it should. Nowadays, the vast majority of inverters come with an app that you can use on your phone or tablet and track how much production your system is producing in real time. If you have that capability, I highly encourage you to check it out. It's a good idea to keep tabs on your system. So that way, if you notice one day your production just plummeted, but it's a nice sunny day outside, excuse me, that probably means something went wrong with your system and you'll want to get it checked out. And then how long do solar systems last? Like I mentioned, most are warranted for 25 years, but they'll last well beyond that if they're taken care of. I've seen panels on roofs that are 30 years, even 40 years old that are still working and producing power. They just will produce less and be a little less efficient after 25 years. Now, HOAs, homeowners association, is another concern that many people have. Thankfully, Arizona is one of the few states that has a law that essentially just says homeowners associations cannot stop you from installing solar. Now, they are allowed to put in some restrictions. For example, I've seen like a design review board, but there's actually been an appellate court decision that ruled at the end of the day, homeowners associations cannot prevent Arizonans from installing solar. If you live in an HOA and run into any issues with that, please reach out to us. We have a lot of experience dealing with HOAs. And then finally, if you're in a historic district, I'm just going to highly encourage you to check your local district guidelines. They vary so much from city to city that it's would be irresponsible for me to give you one piece of advice. For example, in Phoenix, where I live, some districts have rules that say you can install solar, but it needs to be on the backside of your roof so that it's not visible from the main street. And so if you live in a historic district, highly encourage you to just check those local district rules to make sure you're not jeopardizing any sort of tax incentives with your property. All right, that was our longest section of solar technology. I'm just going to take a quick pause there. Trinity, I can't see the chat. Do we have any questions I need to answer out loud?
Nope, all good.
All right, cool. Let's move in then to talking a little bit about the economics of solar. So I love looking at this graph. This is a really cool graph to me that represents a lot of innovation and evolution over the years in the solar industry. Back in the 70s, or I should back up. When we talk about pricing for solar, it's usually priced per watt. And so back in the 1970s, it was not uncommon for solar to cost hundreds of dollars per watt, which made an overall solar system extremely expensive and cost prohibitive. Fast forward to today, the price of solar panels has dropped significantly to the point that we see solar panels for $3, $2, even less a watt sometimes. This says, costs have dropped about 73% since 2010. Definitely believe it. Solar really has an excellent return on investment now for the vast majority of households. It's no longer just a specialty project that only very few people can afford. And thanks to the 30% solar tax credit, that makes the whole picture even more affordable for most people. Now, this chart kind of helps explain like why does solar still cost what it does today and where those costs coming from. So starting at the yellow portion at the very bottom, that is the cost of system components. So how much it actually costs to make a solar panel, an inverter, and all the other equipment. And you can see since 2010, and certainly since before, the cost of the system components has fallen pretty dramatically and has continued to fall in, but somewhat leveled out over the last few years. That little green sliver in the middle, that's labor costs. And those have also fallen, but have remained relatively stable over the years. Now, that really big orange bar at the top, that's soft costs. And this is what an installer has to pay for anything that's not labor or the actual equipment. And in Arizona, a huge chunk of that soft cost is marketing. Rooftop solar is a very competitive industry in Arizona. There are a lot of installers that are competing for business, and it's not uncommon for them to have to pay, hundreds, even thousands of dollars on customer acquisition costs just to find a customer that ends up signing a contract. One installer told me their average cost is somewhere between $2,000 and $3,000 per contract, just in marketing costs per customer. So it's a very competitive industry, and that's why you see so many ads for solar, and you may get a lot of door knockers for solar as well. Now, if you contrast this a little bit with Sun's co-op model, we as a nonprofit bring together 100, 150 plus households. We educate them about solar, check out their roof, and make sure their questions are answered. And then we bid out the group to installers. Now, installers are able to offer cheaper pricing on their equipment because they're able to save significantly on marketing costs if they win the group's contract, and they can pass some of those savings on to you. And so, every installer company is a little different. They all operate a little differently, but these are the general trends we see in the market in Arizona. And this also helps explain why going solar through the co-op can be a lot more affordable than if you just went out on your own. Also, for full transparency, the installer for our co-op pays Solar United Neighbors $600 per signed contract that they receive from us. That helps recuperate our costs for running the program. And I've been told many, many times that that is a huge bargain for solar installation companies. Now, thanks to the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA, the federal tax credit for solar was extended and expanded back to its full 30% until the end of 2032, after which point it will start stepping down again. So if you install solar this year, let's say it's $10,000 just for nice round numbers. Next spring, when you file your taxes, you'll be eligible for a $3,000 credit on your taxes. It's really important to note that this is a tax credit. It is not a rebate. It is not something you get at point of purchase. And you do have to have taxable income in order to claim it. So if you don't pay any federal income taxes, unfortunately, that means you're not eligible for the federal tax credit. However, if you only pay a little taxes, you can roll over this credit multiple years, which can be really valuable for significantly lowering your tax liability for multiple years. The state of Arizona also offers a 25% state tax credit, but it's capped at $1,000. So pretty much everybody's only just able to claim $1,000, but it's still helpful. We also have a law on the books that says if installing solar increases your property tax value, it cannot increase your property tax liability by that amount. And that is enforced by each county's assessor's office. And then finally, we do not pay sales taxes on solar panels, which helps bring down the cost a little bit more. Now, I mentioned the Inflation Reduction Act, or IRA. Of course, at Sun, we're mostly focused on the solar pieces of that bill. But I did just also want to mention that there are a lot of other components in this law that can help you transition to cleaner and greener technologies. Oftentimes, when people are considering solar, they're also thinking about other upgrades to their home. Maybe they're getting a new appliance or thinking about getting an electric vehicle. If you are one of those people, I highly encourage you to let your installer know as soon as possible. Let's say, you plan to purchase an electric vehicle next year, your electricity consumption at home is definitely going to go up. And so your installer is going to want to know that so they can accurately size your solar system. Some of these are tax credits, some of them are rebates, and unfortunately, some of them are only available depending on your income level. But there is help to pay for an electrical panel upgrade, an electric vehicle charging station, the electric vehicle itself, heat pumps if they're electric, battery storage, as well as electric stoves, and much more, believe it or not. And so if you're thinking about making any home upgrades this year or next year, I encourage you to look into this or reach out to us, and I'd be happy to send you some resources on how these all work. So I know what you're asking yourself, but what does it all cost? So unfortunately, I can't tell you that specifically. Every single co-op is a separate round that we organize. We do a separate bidding round for each co-op, and a separate installer is often chosen for each co-op. And so we don't have specific pricing yet on what this will cost for you if you're joining this co-op. But we did just want to include some general sample pricing to give you a rough sense of how much solar costs today. For this example, we use $2.75 a watt. That's honestly a little bit high these days. We've seen co-ops that come in at 250 a watt, 225 a watt, even less. But just to be conservative, we stuck with 275. So for a 4 kilowatt array, that would cost you $11,000. For an 8 kilowatt array, which is closer to average size, that would be $22,000. You can see if you're able to claim the federal and state tax credit, that brings down the cost quite a bit. And then we have some really cool modeling software at Sun. And based off of your local utility, we estimate for an average size home, how much electricity are you going to save with a 4 and an 8 kilowatt system? And so for the 8 kilowatt system, in your first year, we estimate you'll save somewhere around $1,600, again, just for an average size household, meaning that by year 25, you're saving close to $50,000 on electricity costs and technically coming out with a little bit of a profit after the lifespan of those solar systems. So again, this is all just sample pricing, but wanted to give you a rough sense of what pricing you can be expecting if you make it through the co-op. Now, to pay for your solar system, there's a couple different options. Of course, if you're able to pay cash up front, that's the highest upfront cost, but will also maximize your savings in the long run. I'll talk about loans a little bit on the next slide. Third-party ownership in Arizona mostly refers to leases. This is where a third party, usually the installer or maybe the financer, will actually own the panels on your system, and then you're paying a flat monthly fee to lease them from them. At Sun, we always encourage people, if you're not able to afford a solar system, encourage you to explore getting a loan to actually own that system. Leases are only for a fixed period of time. You've got to pay that flat monthly fee every single month. And the devil's in the details, right? Some leases are really good. They can be super advantageous. Some of them have really bad terms. And so we generally encourage people, if you can, look towards solar ownership, simply because it will maximize your savings in the long run. But one area where leases might be advantageous is if you're somebody who can't claim that federal tax credit, your installer or another business can. And so they'll install the system on your roof. They can claim that 30% and pass some of those savings on to you in the form of a better lease agreement. So if you're considering the lease, which you'll be able to do through this co-op, that's great, that's fine, but I would just encourage you to be really careful about looking at the terms of that agreement before you're signed, because then you're locked in for anywhere from 10 to 20 years. There's one grant we always like to make sure people are aware of. That's the Rural Energy for America program, or REAP. If you are a farmer, a cattle rancher, or own a small business in a rural part of the state, which most of Coconino County is, you can get up to 50% of the cost of your solar paid for by the federal government. So if you think you may qualify for that, please let us know. We would love to help you apply for that grant. The majority of people in Arizona do finance their system and end up taking out a loan. So the important thing to know is that you have options. You can get a loan through the installer that you're working with, or you don't have to. Some people do, some people don't. It can be really nice. The installer has preferred financing partners that they work with. They make the process really seamless for you and easy. But I always encourage people to shop around. Check out their local bank or credit union, ask if they have a solar loan option, and compare that to the one that your installer is offering you. Now, a home equity line of credit or refinancing your home, pre-COVID, this was a very popular way for people to pay for their system. Now, with interest rates being pretty high, definitely would not recommend this as your first choice. But as interest rates start to come down a little bit, this may become more of an option again for people to pay for solar. And then I also wanted to note that Sun members who join the co-op have access to the Clean Energy Credit Union and the Community First Credit Union. These are national credit unions that offer solar loans, often at pretty competitive rates. And so if you're not happy with the financiers that your installer is offering, your local bank doesn't have an option, you do have options with these two national credit unions. All right, that was our solar economics section. Trinity, I'm going to ask you one more time if there's anything I need to answer.
All good so far.
Cool. It's one thing I wish I could figure out about Zoom. I can't see the chat when I'm presenting, so I have to ask. Alrighty, our last and smallest section will just explain how the co-op model works. So some of the benefits of going solar through a sun co-op as opposed to just working on your own. First and foremost, we aggregate lots of consumers together and we bid out the group to installers who are offering bulk discounts. Basically, due to economies of scale, this helps you save money, which is one of the main reasons that people join our co-ops. Then, the other big benefit we saw in our 501(c)(3) nonprofit, we're there for your best interest. We will provide free education, technical advice, and any support that you need throughout the entire process, including after. So if there's ever a problem with your installation or you just can't get in contact with somebody, we're there to back you up as your watchdogs and to advocate on behalf of your interests. You're also going to get to go solar with your neighbors. They may not be your immediate next door neighbors, but they'll be within your community. And that's a really cool thing. Most people go solar on their own and kind of have to figure it out on their own. But if you join our co-op, you're going solar with, anywhere from a couple dozen to 100 of your neighbors. And, we'll continue to hold events throughout the year after the co-op wraps up. And if you're interested, you can really become part of a growing solar movement. We do events and we have volunteers to help impact policy. Also, if you're not interested in any of that and you just want to get a solar system and that's it, that's great too. We don't care. We want to help people go solar. But if you are interested in doing some advocacy or volunteering work, we would love to work with you on that. The entire co-op process is anywhere from, 6 to 8 months, depending on how long installation takes. We are all in step one right now. So the co-op has launched and we are at the Solar 101. Hopefully you're learning something new about solar and the process. After this wraps up, you are welcome to join the co-op. You can sign up on, excuse me, you can sign up for the co-op online. It's free to do and it's no commitment to go solar. So you can back out at any time, no hard feelings, no penalties. If you do end up signing up for the co-op, I really hope that you'll help us share the co-op and spread the word with your friends, neighbors, relatives, anybody you know who doesn't like paying their electric bill. We have a goal of about 150 households for this particular co-op, and that's definitely doable, but not without your help. Now, step four is all about the installer selection process. At Sun, we think it's really important that you, the co-op members, who will be spending your own money and having skin in the game, you get to have a say in which installer you work with. So once the co-op has reached somewhere around 30 members, we will issue a request for proposals or an RFP to as many solar installers as we can find in your area. They are going to bid pricing on all of their equipment and servicing. Our RFP process is very thorough. We ask about pricing for batteries, EV charging, service panel upgrades. We ask all about the details of their warranties and also about details about the company itself to make sure that they're a high quality company. Once we've received all of those bids, we do our due diligence to check the companies out. We check reviews, references, to make sure that they are a good company to consider. And then volunteers from the co-op who would like to will form what we call the selection committee. They'll meet together one evening, usually via Zoom, and go over all of the bids together. We'll be there to kind of help provide support and education, but it's ultimately up to the selection committee to vote and pick one installer to work with on behalf of the group. If you're interested in joining that selection committee, please let us know or indicate so when you sign up for the co-op. Now, the co-op's only open for a specific amount of time, and so the pricing deals that the installer is offering is only accessible to people who have joined this co-op. And so it'll be open for about 3 months. We'll close it in mid-January. But once an installer is selected, we're going to hand over our full list of however many co-op members we have, and they're going to start reaching out to every single co-op member. They will meet with you, probably ask for some utility bill history, and design a custom solar proposal for your roof. At this point, if everything looks great, you feel super confident and have the information you need, we hope that you'll go ahead and sign a contract with the installer and move towards the installation phase. But again, if you don't want to or it just doesn't feel right, you can absolutely back out at any time. There are no penalties or anything like that. Once you've signed a contract with your installer, they're going to go back and do the finishing touches on designing that system. They're also going to work with your city or county to get the necessary permits that they need for the system. And then the actual day of installation is very quick. Usually they finish in less than a day, maybe like a day at the most. But from the time you sign a contract to getting the system installed can take several weeks or a couple months, again, just depending on how fast your city is with processing permits. Once your system's installed, the utility company needs to come out and check to make sure that everything is connected properly and give their sign off before the system is attached to the larger grid. That's called permission to operate. And once they offer that, your system will be turned on, it'll start producing right away, and you'll be enjoying free electricity from the Arizona sunshine. Once the vast majority of the installations are completed, I would love to come back up to Flagstaff or Sedona again to have some sort of celebration event, to meet more of you all in person and talk about the successes we were able to have as a group. So like I said, this co-op is open and it's live now. It's free to join. If you'd like to, you can scan the QR code. Otherwise, go to solarunitedneighbors.org/northernaz to sign up for the co-op. We'll leave this open just for a couple seconds longer in case you need to grab your phone. And if you just can't get enough of me, I'm going to be up in Sedona on, I realize I probably should have flipped these. I'm going to be in Flagstaff on October 30th and Sedona on October 31st. You can scan those QR codes to RSVP for those events. It's basically going to be the exact same Solar 101 that I gave tonight, just in person. But if you come to the one in Flagstaff, we will be buying everybody a beer. And so if you want to come out and say, hey, or have any questions that you weren't able to get answered tonight, I would love to see you and meet you in person. That wraps up everything I had for you today. Our email is there, azteam@solarunitedneighbors.org. If there's a question you'd like to ask, but not right now, please feel free to reach out. Otherwise, we're going to hang out just for a couple minutes if there's any last questions. But otherwise, thank you so much for joining.